At 2:17 in the morning, the trucking CEO received the call she had feared for years. Victoria Hayes sat upright in bed before the second ring finished. Her hand reached for the phone automatically. The glowing numbers on the nightstand clock seemed unreal. 2:17 a.m. Nobody called at that hour with good news. Outside her penthouse apartment overlooking downtown Nashville, Tennessee, cold rain struck the windows in steady waves. The city lights blurred against the glass. Victoria answered immediately. "This is Victoria." The voice on the other end sounded tense. "We have a serious problem." Victoria closed her eyes. Her stomach tightened. For nearly a decade, she had built Hayes Logistics into one of the fastest-growing transportation companies in the region. Thousands of deliveries moved through her network every week. Major retailers depended on her company. Manufacturers depended on her company. Entire supply chains depended on her company. Yet all it took was one crisis to shake everything. "Tell me," she said calmly. The caller took a breath. "3 of our largest carriers pulled out tonight." Silence. Victoria sat perfectly still. "How many routes?" 37. Her eyes opened immediately. 37 routes. Not next month. Not next week. Immediately. Critical freight. Time-sensitive contracts. Millions of dollars hanging in the balance. Rain continued tapping against the glass while the weight of the situation settled around her. "What options do we have?" she asked. More silence. Then came the answer she never expected. "There is one company that might be able to handle it." Victoria stood from the bed. "Who?" The caller hesitated. "Carter Freight Solutions." For several seconds, she said nothing. The name landed harder than the crisis itself. Carter Freight Solutions. Ryan Carter. The single father she had rejected. Not once. Not twice. 5 times. Victoria walked slowly toward the window overlooking the city. Far below, empty streets reflected the rain. Memories surfaced instantly. A modest office. A worn leather folder. A calm man standing across a conference table. Ryan Carter had approached Hayes Logistics years ago, seeking a partnership. He had arrived with professionalism, preparation, confidence. Yet each time, Victoria saw the same thing. Too small. Too risky. Too unknown. 5 separate meetings. 5 separate rejections. 5 times Ryan simply nodded, thanked her for her time, and walked away without complaint. Most people argued. Most people begged. Ryan never did either. "There has to be someone else," Victoria said quietly. The voice on the phone answered immediately. "There is not." She felt her chest tighten. "What about National Freight? Overextended. Mid-South Logistics? Capacity issues. Turner Transport? Already committed." Every answer sounded worse than the one before. Finally, the caller spoke again. "Ryan Carter is the only operator still delivering on schedule across every affected route." Victoria stared at the rain running down the glass. The irony felt impossible. Years ago, she had considered Ryan too small to matter. Now her entire company might depend on him. Across town, while executives panicked and phones rang throughout the night, Ryan Carter was asleep. His modest home sat 20 miles outside the city, near rolling farmland and quiet highways. No penthouse, no skyline view, no corporate tower, just a comfortable house, a pickup truck in the driveway, and a life built through patience. Down the hallway, his 10-year-old daughter Lily slept peacefully. Family photos lined the walls. School awards decorated shelves. Everything reflected the priorities of a man who measured success differently. At 5:45 a.m., Ryan's alarm clock sounded. He turned it off immediately. No panic. No emergency meetings. No crisis calls. Just another morning. By 6 o'clock, he was standing in the kitchen preparing breakfast while reviewing delivery schedules on a tablet. Outside, several trucks carrying the Carter Freight logo were already beginning their routes. Drivers checked equipment. Dispatchers confirmed schedules. Freight moved exactly as planned. The operation ran with quiet precision. Hundreds of miles away, storms disrupted competitors. Supply chains struggled. Contracts collapsed. Yet somehow Carter Freight continued moving. Back inside her apartment, Victoria remained awake as dawn slowly approached. She reviewed reports, route maps, driver availability, capacity projections. Every document pointed toward the same conclusion. By sunrise, there was no longer any doubt. Hayes Logistics needed Ryan Carter. The realization settled heavily over the room. Because somewhere between the first rejection and the 5th, The single father she dismissed had built something extraordinary. And in only a few hours, Victoria Hayes would have to walk through a door she once closed herself. 5 rejections can teach a person many things. They can teach bitterness. They can teach resentment. Or they can teach patience. Ryan Carter chose the third option. As the first rays of sunlight spread across the Tennessee countryside, he finished his coffee and stepped outside. Cool morning air carried the distant sound of diesel engines starting across his property. Several trucks sat lined up near the dispatch building, their headlights cutting through the fading darkness. Drivers exchanged greetings. Mechanics completed inspections. Another day was beginning. To an outsider, Carter Freight Solutions might still look modest. No glass towers. No corporate branding campaigns. No flashy advertisements. Yet beneath the surface, something remarkable had been built. Ryan climbed into his pickup truck and drove toward the operations center located a quarter-mile from his house. Along the way, he passed rows of well-maintained trailers and service vehicles. Every piece of equipment reflected years of discipline. Nothing extravagant. Everything dependable. Dependability was Ryan's favorite word. Inside the dispatch office, computer screens displayed routes stretching across multiple states. Drivers checked schedules while dispatchers coordinated deliveries. The atmosphere felt calm despite the complexity. Nobody rushed. Nobody panicked. Systems worked because people trusted one another. Ryan greeted everyone by name. "Morning, Jake." "Morning, Sarah." "How is your son's baseball team doing, Mike?" Small conversations. Simple respect. The kind of leadership that rarely appears in magazines. At 7:15 a.m., his phone vibrated. Ryan glanced at the screen. An unfamiliar executive assistant from Hayes Logistics. He stared for a moment before answering. Ryan Carter speaking. The voice sounded formal. "Mr. Carter, Ms. Victoria Hayes would like to schedule a meeting." Silence. Around him, trucks continued departing on schedule. Dispatchers continued working. The world moved normally. Yet the request immediately transported him several years into the past. The first meeting had happened in a sleek conference room overlooking downtown Nashville. Ryan remembered carrying a carefully prepared proposal. He remembered explaining how his small fleet consistently achieved delivery rates that exceeded industry averages. Victoria had listened politely. Then she smiled professionally. "Your numbers are impressive." Ryan felt hopeful. Then came the rest. "Unfortunately, your company is simply too small for our long-term needs." Rejection number 1. Ryan had thanked her for the opportunity and left. 3 months later, he returned with expanded capacity. New drivers. Additional routes. Better performance metrics. Victoria reviewed everything carefully. Then she folded her hands. "You are making progress, Mr. Carter. But we need partners with significantly larger infrastructure." Rejection number 2. Again, Ryan thanked her and left. The third meeting came after another year of growth. More trucks. More contracts. More experience. Yet the answer remained unchanged. "We are moving in a different direction." Rejection number 3. The fourth arrived after a major regional expansion. The fifth followed 6 months later. Each meeting ended differently. Each rejection sounded slightly different. Yet the result never changed. Too small. Too limited. Too risky. Ryan never argued. He never complained. He simply returned to work. Back in the present, the assistant spoke again. "Mr. Carter?" Ryan blinked. "Sorry. Yes. Would 10 o'clock work?" He looked around the operations center. Drivers monitored shipments. Route maps updated in real time. Customers checked delivery statuses through proprietary software his team had developed. None of this existed during those 5 meetings. 10 o'clock is fine. After ending the call, Ryan slipped the phone into his pocket. One of his dispatch managers noticed. "Everything okay?" Ryan smiled. "Looks like Hayes Logistics wants a meeting." The room grew noticeably quieter. Several employees exchanged looks. Everyone knew the history. They had lived through it together. Jake shook his head. "After all these years?" Ryan laughed softly. Apparently, nobody celebrated. Nobody mocked the situation. That reflected Ryan's influence more than anything else. Character tends to spread through organizations the same way culture does. Around 9:30, Ryan began driving toward Nashville. Autumn sunlight illuminated rolling hills and stretches of interstate lined with freight traffic. Along the way, his thoughts remained surprisingly calm. He did not wonder whether Victoria regretted the rejections. He did not imagine revenge. He did not rehearse speeches. Those things interested him less than people assumed. Because while others focused on being rejected 5 times, Ryan focused on something else entirely. The company those rejections helped create. And somewhere high above downtown Nashville, Victoria Hayes stood beside her office window, watching traffic below. In less than 30 minutes, she would come face to face with the man she once considered too small to matter. The difference now was that one company needed help, and the other finally had it. Ryan arrived 5 minutes early. He always did. The Hayes Logistics headquarters rose above downtown Nashville in glass and steel, reflecting the bright autumn sky. Employees hurried through revolving doors carrying coffee cups and laptops. Luxury vehicles lined the parking structure. Everything about the building projected success. Yet as Ryan parked his pickup truck and stepped onto the sidewalk, he felt the same calm confidence he carried into every meeting. Success had stopped impressing him years ago. Character mattered more. Inside the lobby, a receptionist greeted him immediately. "Mr. Carter, Ms. Hayes is expecting you." Ryan smiled. "Thank you." The elevator ride to the executive floor lasted less than a minute. It felt much longer for Victoria Hayes. She stood near the conference room window watching traffic move below. Her leadership team sat around a polished table covered with route maps, shipment schedules, and emergency projections. The mood remained tense. Every hour without a solution increased the damage. Several executives glanced toward the door repeatedly. Then it opened. Ryan Carter walked in carrying a simple leather portfolio. For a brief moment, nobody spoke. Victoria felt an unexpected wave of embarrassment. The man standing before her looked almost exactly as he had during the first meeting years ago. Professional, calm, prepared. The difference was no longer Ryan. The difference was everything he had built. "Mr. Carter," Victoria said. Ryan nodded politely. "Good morning." No sarcasm. No bitterness. No reminder of the past. Just professionalism. Somehow that made the situation harder. The meeting began immediately. One executive activated a large screen displaying affected freight corridors stretching across multiple states. Distribution centers, retail locations, manufacturing facilities. Millions of dollars in delayed shipments. Ryan listened carefully without interrupting. Occasionally he asked a question. Occasionally he made a note. Mostly he listened. After 20 minutes, the presentation ended. Silence settled across the room. Finally, Victoria folded her hands. "Can you handle these routes?" Ryan studied the information one final time. "Yes." Several executives exchanged surprised looks. The answer came too quickly, too confidently. One manager leaned forward. "You understand we are talking about 37 critical routes." Ryan nodded. "I do. Most regional carriers cannot absorb that volume." Ryan smiled slightly. "Most regional carriers are not structured the way we are." The room grew quiet again. Victoria noticed something she had missed years ago. Ryan never exaggerated, never sold, never tried to impress people. He simply stated facts and let results speak for themselves. "Walk us through it," she said. Ryan stood and approached the screen. Over the next 20 minutes, he outlined a detailed plan. Backup drivers, equipment reserves, cross-state dispatch systems, strategic partnerships, maintenance scheduling, fuel logistics, contingency networks. Every question received an answer. Every problem already had a solution. The executives gradually stopped challenging him and started taking notes. By the end of the presentation, nobody looked skeptical anymore. They looked relieved. Victoria felt something else. Regret. Because as Ryan explained his systems, she realized many of them had existed years earlier in simpler forms. The signs had always been there. She simply failed to recognize them. After the meeting ended, most executives left to begin implementation discussions. Soon only Ryan and Victoria remained in the conference room. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city stretched endlessly below. Neither spoke at first. Finally, Victoria broke the silence. "I owe you an apology." Ryan looked toward her. "For what?" The question surprised her. "For rejecting you." Ryan considered the statement. "That was your decision to make." 5 times. He nodded. "Still your decision." Victoria looked away briefly. "You are making this harder than I expected." Ryan laughed softly. "How?" "You are not angry." The answer came immediately. "Being angry would not have helped me build a company." The words settled gently between them. No accusation. No judgment. Just truth. Victoria stared out the window. Years of assumptions suddenly felt very small. Did you ever think about giving up? She asked quietly. Ryan smiled. Of course. Then why did you keep going? For the first time, his expression softened. He reached into his wallet and removed a small photograph. A young girl smiled back from the picture. Lily Carter, 10 years old. Ryan placed the photo on the table. Because every time a door closed, she was still waiting for me at home. Victoria looked at the photograph, then at Ryan, then back at the photograph again. And in that moment, she began to understand something far more important than logistics, contracts, or freight routes. The company standing before her had not been built from ambition alone. It had been built from responsibility, perseverance, and a father's promise to his daughter. The contract discussions moved quickly after that meeting, but Ryan's attention remained focused on execution rather than celebration. By the following morning, Carter Freight Solutions had already begun integrating routes, assigning drivers, and coordinating schedules with Hayes Logistics. While executives across Nashville exchanged urgent emails and attended emergency calls, Ryan stood inside a maintenance facility reviewing tire inspections with one of his fleet managers. The contrast could not have been greater. For Hayes Logistics, the situation felt like a crisis. For Carter Freight, it felt like another responsibility to fulfill. Victoria noticed the difference immediately. 2 days later, she drove to Carter Freight headquarters for the first time. The facility sat outside the city near open farmland and long stretches of highway. As her vehicle approached the entrance, she expected something modest. What she found instead left her speechless. Trucks moved efficiently through loading zones. Dispatch teams monitored routes from a modern operations center. Drivers attended safety briefings. Maintenance crews worked with careful precision. Everything appeared organized. Everything appeared intentional. Most surprising of all, there was no chaos. A company handling this volume should have felt overwhelmed. Instead, it felt calm. Victoria stepped out of her vehicle and watched the operation for several moments. Employees greeted one another by name. Supervisors listened to concerns. Drivers seemed genuinely engaged. There was pride here, not arrogance. Pride. Ryan emerged from the operations building carrying a clipboard. Victoria. She smiled politely. I hope I am not interrupting anything. Ryan glanced around. Just a normal Thursday. The answer made her laugh softly. Your version of normal is impressive. Ryan shrugged. We try to stay prepared. He offered a tour without ceremony. No presentation. No attempt to impress her. They walked through dispatch rooms filled with route maps and tracking systems. They visited maintenance facilities where technicians inspected equipment with remarkable attention to detail. They stopped at a training center where new drivers reviewed safety procedures. Everywhere they went, employees greeted Ryan warmly. Not because he was the owner, because they respected him. Victoria noticed the difference immediately. Respect earned through position feels temporary. Respect earned through character feels permanent. At one point, a driver approached carrying paperwork. Ryan, my daughter has a school event next Tuesday. Ryan smiled. You should be there. I already found coverage. Good. The driver nodded gratefully and walked away. Victoria watched the exchange. You know all of them personally? Ryan looked confused by the question. Most of them. There are more than 100 employees here. Ryan smiled. They are not employee numbers. The simplicity of the answer stayed with her. Later they entered a break room where several drivers sat eating lunch. Conversation stopped briefly when Victoria entered. Then something unexpected happened. One of the drivers stood and smiled. You must be the CEO from Nashville. Victoria nodded. I am. The man laughed warmly. Good to finally meet you. Several others agreed. Nobody sounded bitter. Nobody sounded resentful. These were people whose company had been overlooked for years. Yet none of them seemed interested in holding grudges. As they left the room, Victoria looked toward Ryan. They are remarkably positive. Ryan glanced through the window. Most of them helped build this place. Even after being passed over so many times. Ryan smiled, especially after being passed over. The afternoon continued with meetings and planning sessions. By evening, Hayes Logistics had already begun recovering. Deliveries were moving. Contracts were stabilizing. Customers were receiving updates. For the first time since the crisis began, Victoria felt hopeful. As the sun started setting, Ryan invited her to join him for a quick stop before she returned to the city. A few minutes later, they arrived at a small elementary school where parents gathered near a soccer field. Children laughed while running across bright green grass. Victoria looked puzzled. Ryan smiled toward the field. There she is. Lily Carter waved enthusiastically from across the field before sprinting toward them. She threw her arms around her father without hesitation. Ryan laughed and hugged her back. Victoria watched quietly. In boardrooms, Ryan was respected. In business, he was dependable. But here, standing beside a soccer field beneath the orange glow of sunset, she saw the true foundation beneath everything he had built. Not ambition, not revenge, not success, love. And for the second time that week, Victoria Hayes realized she had underestimated him far more than she ever imagined. The recovery began quietly. No headlines announced it. No television crews arrived. No executives stood behind podiums celebrating success. Freight simply started moving again. Day after day, truck after truck, shipment after shipment, Carter Freight Solutions absorbed responsibilities that many larger companies could not handle. Across Tennessee, Kentucky, Arkansas, and Missouri, delivery schedules stabilized. Warehouses reopened loading lanes. Retailers received inventory. Manufacturing plants avoided shutdowns. Customers who had spent sleepless nights waiting for updates finally began breathing easier. Yet while Hayes Logistics slowly regained stability, something else was happening beneath the surface. Victoria Hayes found herself asking questions she had never asked before. Not about routes. Not about contracts. About people. One Friday morning she arrived at Carter Freight headquarters earlier than expected. The sun had barely risen. Frost covered the grass surrounding the facility. Drivers were already arriving. Mechanics were already working. Dispatch screens already displayed hundreds of active shipments. Victoria parked and watched quietly from her vehicle. She expected supervisors. She expected managers. Instead, she noticed Ryan carrying a box of breakfast sandwiches into the dispatch office. One by one, employees greeted him. Some discussed work. Others discussed children, family events, or weekend plans. The conversations felt genuine. Nobody seemed nervous around him. Nobody seemed eager to impress him. They simply trusted him. Victoria entered the building a few minutes later. Ryan smiled. "You are here early." She glanced around. Apparently not as early as everyone else. Ryan laughed. Freight does not sleep. The answer sounded simple. Yet everything about his company reflected the same philosophy. Responsibility before recognition. Service before status. During the following weeks, Victoria spent more time with Carter Freight than she originally planned. At first it was business necessity. Then curiosity took over. Eventually, it became admiration. She observed drivers who had remained loyal for years. She met dispatchers who had started when the company consisted of only 3 trucks. She spoke with mechanics who turned down higher-paying jobs elsewhere because they respected Ryan's leadership. One afternoon, she sat with an employee named Carl during lunch. Carl had worked for Carter Freight for nearly 12 years. "What keeps everyone here?" Victoria asked. Carl smiled immediately. "Ryan." "Just Ryan?" Carl nodded. "Most owners care about trucks. Ryan cares about people driving them." The answer stayed with her long after lunch ended. Meanwhile, Ryan remained unchanged. The new contracts, the increased revenue, the recognition from Hayes Logistics. None of it seemed to affect him. Every afternoon, he still called Lily after school. Every evening, he still reviewed operations personally. Every weekend, he still attended soccer games and school events whenever possible. His priorities remained exactly where they had always been. One evening, Victoria witnessed something she never forgot. She arrived unexpectedly near closing time and found Ryan sitting alone inside the dispatch office reviewing reports. A driver entered carrying a folder. The man looked uncomfortable. "Ryan, I need to talk to you." Ryan immediately set the reports aside. "What is going on?" The driver explained that his wife required unexpected medical treatment. The expenses worried him. Before the conversation ended, Ryan had already approved additional paid leave and arranged support through an employee assistance fund. No meeting, no paperwork battle, no corporate delay, just help. After the driver left, Victoria sat silently. "How often does that happen?" Ryan looked confused. "People needing help?" She nodded. "More often than most people realize." "And you always do something?" Ryan smiled. "Whenever I can." Victoria stared at him. "That is not how most companies operate." Ryan leaned back slightly. "Maybe that is why most companies struggle to keep good people." The answer made her laugh softly. Yet she knew he was right. For years she had measured success through growth charts, market share, and quarterly performance. Ryan measured success differently. His numbers mattered, but they were not the foundation. People were. As November approached, Hayes Logistics had nearly completed its recovery. Contracts were secure. Customers were satisfied. Revenue losses were shrinking rapidly. Board members praised Victoria's leadership for navigating the crisis. Each compliment made her increasingly uncomfortable, because she knew the truth. Without Ryan Carter, none of it would have happened. One evening, she stood inside her office overlooking downtown Nashville while reviewing reports. The city lights stretched endlessly beyond the windows. Her company had survived. Yet the greatest lesson from the crisis had nothing to do with logistics. It had everything to do with character. Somewhere along the way, the single father she rejected 5 times had become the standard against which she now measured leadership. And that realization changed far more than her business. By early December, the emergency that once threatened Hayes Logistics had become a case study in recovery. Industry publications praised the turnaround. Clients renewed contracts. Investors regained confidence. From the outside, everything looked successful again. Yet inside Victoria Hayes, something much more significant was happening. Success no longer felt like the most important achievement. One Monday morning, she sat inside a board meeting while senior executives reviewed quarterly projections. Charts covered large screens. Revenue forecasts exceeded expectations. Applause followed several announcements. Under normal circumstances, Victoria would have enjoyed the moment. Instead, her attention drifted toward a question she could not stop asking herself. How many people had she overlooked over the years because they did not look impressive enough? The thought followed her throughout the day. That afternoon, she drove to Carter Freight without scheduling a meeting. The facility had become strangely familiar. Drivers waved as she arrived. Dispatchers greeted her by name. The atmosphere felt welcoming in a way corporate offices rarely did. She found Ryan near the maintenance building reviewing inspection reports. "You are becoming a regular visitor," he said with a smile. Victoria laughed softly. "I noticed." Ryan set the reports aside. "Everything okay?" She hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." They began walking across the property while trucks moved steadily in the background. Cold air carried the sound of engines and distant conversations. "Did the rejections ever make you doubt yourself?" Victoria asked. Ryan thought for a moment. "Sometimes." The answer surprised her. "Really?" He nodded. "Anybody who says otherwise is probably not being honest." Victoria glanced toward him. "Then how did you keep going?" Ryan smiled. "Because doubt is not the same thing as defeat." The simplicity of the answer stayed with her. For years, she had assumed confidence meant never questioning yourself. Ryan seemed to understand something different. Confidence meant continuing despite uncertainty. They reached a fenced observation area overlooking part of the fleet. Rows of trucks stretched toward the horizon. Drivers prepared for long-distance routes. Others returned from deliveries completed overnight. The operation felt alive. Victoria looked around carefully. "When did you realize this company would succeed?" Ryan laughed. "I did not." "You never knew?" "No." He pointed toward a departing truck. "I just focused on improving one thing at a time." Victoria shook her head. "That sounds almost impossible." Ryan smiled. "Building a company is difficult. Building it while raising a child alone is even harder." The words carried no self-pity, only truth. As they continued talking, Lily arrived unexpectedly after school. She stepped out of a friend's vehicle carrying a backpack nearly as large as herself. "Dad." Ryan immediately smiled. "Hey, kiddo." Lily ran over and hugged him. Then she noticed Victoria. "Hi." Victoria laughed. "Hello." Over the following half hour, she watched father and daughter interact while reviewing homework assignments and discussing an upcoming school project. The conversation felt ordinary. Yet Victoria found herself paying attention to every detail. Ryan listened completely when Lily spoke. He encouraged her ideas. He celebrated small achievements. Most importantly, he was present, fully present. It reminded her of something she rarely saw among executives, including herself: the ability to focus on what truly mattered in the moment. Later that evening, after Lily left with friends for a school activity, Victoria and Ryan sat inside a small conference room overlooking the operations floor. Workers moved below while dispatch screens tracked shipments across several states. "Can I be honest?" Victoria asked. Ryan smiled. "That is usually a good idea." She looked through the glass toward the busy facility. I spent years believing leadership was about being the smartest person in the room. Ryan remained quiet. Now I am not so sure. He leaned back slightly. What do you think it is? Victoria considered the question carefully. For the first time, she already knew the answer. Making people better because they worked with you. Silence followed. Not because Ryan disagreed. Because he did not need to say anything. The expression on his face told her enough. For a brief moment, neither looked away. Outside, winter sunlight faded behind distant hills. Trucks continued moving. Employees continued working. Life continued exactly as before. Yet something important had changed. The woman who once measured people by size, scale, and appearance was beginning to understand value in an entirely different way. And somewhere deep inside, Victoria Hayes realized the greatest lesson from this crisis had never been about logistics. It had been about character all along. 2 weeks before Christmas, Hayes Logistics organized its annual leadership summit. Every year, executives, managers, and major industry partners gathered in Nashville to celebrate achievements, review strategy, and recognize outstanding contributions. Normally, the event focused on growth metrics and financial performance. This year felt different, at least to Victoria Hayes. Standing inside the ballroom of a downtown hotel, she watched hundreds of guests arrive beneath elegant lights and seasonal decorations. Conversations filled the room. Industry leaders exchanged greetings. Reporters moved between groups gathering comments. Everything looked successful, yet Victoria's attention remained fixed on one empty chair near the front. The chair reserved for Ryan Carter. Earlier that week, she had personally invited him to attend. He nearly declined. These events are not really my thing, he admitted during a phone call. Victoria laughed. That is exactly why you should come. Eventually, he agreed. Now she found herself unexpectedly hoping he would actually arrive. Across town, Ryan adjusted his tie while standing in front of a mirror. Lily sat on the edge of the bed, watching him with amusement. You look uncomfortable. Ryan smiled. I am uncomfortable. Then why are you wearing the tie? Because apparently adults make strange choices sometimes. Lily laughed. That seems accurate. A few minutes later, they drove toward downtown Nashville together. The city sparkled with holiday lights. Storefronts displayed seasonal decorations. Families filled sidewalks carrying shopping bags and hot chocolate. It felt like the kind of evening people remember years later without knowing exactly why. When Ryan and Lily entered the ballroom, several conversations immediately paused. Not because he was famous, not because he sought attention, because many people in the room knew exactly who had helped save Hayes Logistics. Word travels quickly in business communities, especially stories involving quiet competence. Ryan greeted people politely and found a table near the back, exactly where he preferred to be. Lily noticed immediately. You are hiding. I am sitting near the back. Ryan smiled. That too. As the evening progressed, awards were presented and speeches were delivered. Applause echoed throughout the ballroom. Executives discussed accomplishments. Managers recognized team members. Everything followed the usual schedule. Then Victoria stepped onto the stage for the final presentation of the night. The room gradually became quiet. She stood beneath warm lighting and looked across hundreds of faces. For a moment, she glanced toward Ryan. Then she began speaking. This year taught me something important. The room listened attentively. When challenges appeared, many of us focused on systems, contracts, and numbers. She paused briefly. But recovery happened because of people. Several guests nodded. Victoria continued. Leadership is often misunderstood. We assume it belongs to those with the largest offices, the biggest companies, or the loudest voices. Her gaze moved across the audience. This year proved otherwise. Silence settled over the ballroom. There is someone here tonight who reminded me what leadership actually looks like. Ryan immediately looked uncomfortable. Lily smiled knowingly. Victoria continued speaking. She described perseverance, responsibility, character, the willingness to keep building after rejection. She never mentioned the 5 meetings directly. She did not need to. The story was already clear. Finally, she looked toward the back of the room. Ryan Carter, would you please join me on stage? Hundreds of people turned simultaneously. Ryan closed his eyes briefly. Lily laughed. You are definitely going. The ballroom erupted into applause. Slowly, Ryan stood and walked toward the stage. The applause grew louder with each step, yet his expression remained unchanged. Calm, humble. Slightly embarrassed, Victoria greeted him with a smile. Then she handed him a plaque recognizing his contribution to the company's recovery. Ryan accepted it politely. The audience continued applauding. Finally, Victoria stepped closer to the microphone. "There is one more thing I need to say." The room became silent again. She took a breath. "Years ago, I rejected Ryan's company 5 separate times." A wave of surprise moved through the audience. Victoria continued before anyone could react. "I thought I was making smart business decisions." She looked toward Ryan. "What I was actually doing was failing to recognize character." The room remained completely still. No one checked phones. No one whispered. Everyone listened. When my company needed help, Ryan had every reason to walk away. Her voice softened. Instead, he chose grace. Silence filled the ballroom. The kind of silence that only appears when people recognize truth. Ryan looked toward the audience, then toward Victoria. He did not seem proud. He seemed thoughtful, because deep down he understood something many people never learn. The greatest victories are not the moments when others admit they were wrong. The greatest victories are the moments when you have every opportunity to seek revenge and choose dignity instead. The applause continued long after Victoria finished speaking. It rolled through the ballroom like a wave, rising and falling beneath crystal chandeliers and warm holiday lights. Yet Ryan Carter stood quietly beside her, holding the plaque with the same calm expression he carried into every challenge. Recognition never seemed to change him. The audience eventually settled back into their seats. Victoria stepped away from the microphone and looked toward Ryan. "Would you like to say a few words?" A few people laughed softly because they already suspected the answer. Ryan smiled. "Not really." More laughter followed. Victoria shook her head. "I figured." Yet after a moment, Ryan stepped forward anyway. The room immediately became quiet. Hundreds of people watched him. Industry leaders, executives, business owners, journalists, people accustomed to speeches about growth, strategy, and success. Ryan looked across the room and paused. "I appreciate the recognition." His voice remained steady. "But honestly, this was never about proving anyone wrong." The ballroom grew even quieter. Ryan glanced toward Lily, who sat proudly near the front. Then he continued. 5 rejections did not build my company." Several people looked surprised. Ryan smiled gently. "The people who believed in me built my company." He looked toward his employees seated at a nearby table. Drivers, dispatchers, mechanics, supervisors. Every mile they drove. Every problem they solved. Every early morning and late night. He paused. "That is what built Carter Freight." Silence settled over the room. Not empty silence. Respectful silence. The kind that appears when people recognize authenticity. Ryan continued. "The truth is, every business faces setbacks. Every person faces rejection. The important question is what happens afterward." He looked around the ballroom one final time. "You can become bitter, or you can become better." Then he stepped away from the microphone. No dramatic ending. No attempt to impress anyone. Just truth. The room erupted into applause again. This time even louder than before. Later that evening, after most guests had departed, Victoria found Ryan standing alone near a large window overlooking downtown Nashville. Holiday lights reflected across the glass. Traffic moved below in steady streams. The city seemed peaceful. For a few moments, neither spoke. Finally, Victoria smiled. "You know, that speech probably earned you several new clients." Ryan laughed softly. "That was not the goal." "I know." She looked out at the skyline. "That is why it worked." Another comfortable silence followed. Over the past several months, those silences had become easier. Neither felt the need to fill every moment with conversation. Some forms of respect require no explanation. After a while, Victoria turned toward him. "Can I ask you something?" Ryan nodded. "Sure." She hesitated briefly. "After everything that happened, why did you help us?" Ryan did not answer immediately. Instead, he watched the city lights below. When he finally spoke, his voice remained calm. "Because my values are not supposed to change when circumstances do." Victoria looked at him carefully. Most people would have walked away. Ryan smiled. "Maybe. Some people would have enjoyed watching us struggle." "Probably." Victoria folded her arms. "And you never considered it?" Ryan laughed softly. "Of course I considered it." The honesty surprised her. Ryan continued. "I am human." Then his expression softened. But Lily was watching. Victoria followed his gaze across the ballroom toward his daughter. The answer explained everything. Reputation can influence behavior. Character determines it. A few minutes later, Lily joined them carrying a plate with 2 holiday cookies. I brought backup snacks. Ryan accepted one immediately. Good decision. Victoria laughed and accepted the other. The 3 stood together near the window while the ballroom gradually emptied. Nobody discussed contracts. Nobody discussed revenue. Nobody discussed business. Instead, they talked about school projects, holiday plans, and favorite Christmas movies. Ordinary things. The kinds of conversations success cannot buy. As the evening came to an end, Victoria realized something important. Months earlier, she had viewed Ryan as a potential vendor. Later, she viewed him as a solution. Then she viewed him as an exceptional leader. Now she saw something even more valuable. A man whose success never changed his priorities. A father who built a company without sacrificing his values. A person who understood that dignity is not something you display during easy moments. It is something you protect during difficult ones. Outside, snowflakes began drifting through the night sky for the first time that season. They moved gently beneath streetlights and across quiet city streets. Ryan noticed them first and smiled. Lily immediately ran toward the entrance to get a better look. Victoria stood beside the window watching both of them. And somewhere deep inside, she realized the lesson she would carry for the rest of her life. The most impressive fleet was never the one parked outside. The most impressive thing Ryan Carter built was the character that guided every mile of the journey. Winter settled gently across Tennessee. Snow appeared only occasionally, dusting fields and rooftops before disappearing beneath pale sunlight. The crisis that once threatened Hayes Logistics had faded into memory. Deliveries moved smoothly. Contracts remained secure. Customers were satisfied. Business magazines published articles praising the remarkable recovery. Yet the people who truly understood the story knew something important. The recovery had never been about trucks alone. It had been about character. Several months later, on a bright Saturday afternoon, Carter Freight Solutions hosted a community appreciation event at its headquarters. Families gathered near food trucks and holiday decorations. Children climbed into parked trucks for photographs. Employees introduced relatives to coworkers. Laughter drifted across the property. It felt less like a company event and more like a neighborhood celebration. Ryan moved through the crowd shaking hands and greeting families. Lily stayed close by, occasionally helping younger children find activities. The atmosphere reflected everything he had worked to build. Not just a successful business. A place where people felt valued. Near the entrance, a black SUV pulled into the parking area. Several employees noticed immediately. Victoria Hayes stepped out carrying a small wrapped box. Months earlier, some people might have viewed her arrival as a business appearance. Now nobody seemed surprised. She had become a familiar presence. Drivers greeted her warmly. Dispatchers waved. Even mechanics stopped to say hello. Respect, she had learned, grows differently when it is earned instead of demanded. Ryan spotted her near the registration table. You made it. Victoria smiled. I was invited. Good point. They laughed together. The ease between them now felt natural. Honest. Built slowly through shared challenges and mutual respect. Victoria handed him the small package. This is for you. Ryan looked suspicious immediately. That usually means trouble. Just open it. Inside the box sat a framed photograph. Ryan stared at it for several seconds. The image had been taken during the Leadership Summit months earlier. In the photograph, he stood on stage holding the recognition plaque, while Lily smiled proudly from the audience. The moment looked simple, yet somehow it captured everything. Perseverance, grace, family, quiet strength. Ryan remained silent for a moment. Then he smiled. Thank you. Victoria nodded. I thought you should have it. Nearby, Lily appeared carrying 2 cups of hot chocolate. What are we looking at? Ryan showed her the photograph. Lily immediately smiled. You should put that in your office. Ryan laughed. Maybe. Definitely. The afternoon continued beneath clear skies and cold air. Employees shared stories. Families explored the facility. Children laughed while chasing one another between activity stations. Everywhere Victoria looked, she saw evidence of the same lesson she had learned months earlier. Success built on fear creates compliance. Success built on respect creates loyalty. As sunset approached, people gradually began heading home. Snowflakes drifted lightly through the air, catching the last golden rays of daylight. The property grew quieter. Trucks rested in neat rows. Lights illuminated buildings across the facility. Ryan, Victoria, and Lily stood together overlooking the operations yard. For a few moments, nobody spoke. Finally, Victoria broke the silence. Do you ever think about those 5 meetings? Ryan smiled. Sometimes. Does it still bother you? He looked across the fleet stretching toward the horizon. Then he shook his head. Not anymore. Victoria waited. Ryan continued softly. If every door had opened exactly when I wanted it to, I might never have built this. The answer settled gently into the evening air. No bitterness. No regret. Just gratitude. Lily slipped her hand into her father's. Besides, she said, everything worked out. Ryan laughed. That is one way to put it. Snow continued falling lightly around them. The facility glowed beneath warm lights. Families drove home. Employees waved goodbye. Life moved forward exactly as it should. And in that quiet moment, Victoria finally understood the full meaning of what had happened. The single father had not won because the CEO needed his fleet. He had won years earlier when rejection failed to change who he was. The company was simply the evidence. Real victory had always been his dignity. The kind that survives disappointment. The kind that chooses grace when revenge would be easier. The kind that turns rejection into purpose and success into service. Sometimes the most powerful answer to being underestimated is not proving someone wrong. It is becoming so strong, so kind, and so dependable that one day they quietly realize who you were all along. And if this story reminded you of the value of perseverance, dignity, and second chances, share your thoughts below. We would love to hear what moment stayed with you. And if stories of quiet strength speak to your heart, we hope you will join us again for another journey where character matters more than circumstance.